The Russian Revolution was not a sudden explosion. It was a slow-burning fire that crept through an empire for decades before finally consuming it. It was born from hunger, humiliation, fear, and silence. An empire that once stretched across continents collapsed not because of foreign invasion, but because its own people could no longer endure the weight of suffering placed upon them. At the dawn of the 20th century, Russia stood as one of the largest empires in the world. Its ruler, Tsar Nicholas II, believed with absolute certainty that his power came directly from God. To question the Tsar was to question divine will itself. The Romanov dynasty had ruled for over 300 years, and its authority seemed unshakable. Yet beneath the glittering palaces and ceremonial parades lay a nation in pain. More than 80% of the population were peasants, living in crushing poverty. They worked the land with outdated tools, often surrendering most of their harvest just to survive. Factory workers crowded into dark industrial cities, laboring 12 to 14 hours a day for wages barely enough to eat. Children worked alongside adults. Injuries were common, death was expected. The gap between the ruling elite and the common people was vast and growing wider every year. While nobles dined in luxury, entire families slept hungry. While the royal court celebrated, villages froze through winter without fuel or food. Any attempt to protest was answered with violence. Police and secret informants watched everyone. Fear became a way of life. Nicholas II believed that strength came from control. He refused meaningful reform. Political parties were suppressed, newspapers censored, dissent crushed before it could spread. But repression does not erase anger, it only buries it deeper. Then came war. In 1914, Russia entered the First World War, convinced that patriotism and sheer numbers would guarantee victory. Instead, the war exposed every weakness of the empire. Russian soldiers were sent to the front with little training and even less equipment. Some units were issued one rifle for every 3 men. Those without weapons were told to follow behind and collect rifles from the dead. Battles ended in catastrophe. Entire armies were encircled and destroyed. Millions were killed, wounded, or captured. Morale collapsed. Officers often lacked experience. Supplies failed to arrive. Soldiers froze, starved, and bled in muddy trenches far from home. At home, the war drained the nation dry. Railways broke down. Food shipments failed. Cities began to starve. Bread became scarce. Fuel disappeared. Inflation turned savings into dust. Mothers stood in endless lines in freezing streets, praying food would not run out before their turn. The Tsar remained distant, detached from reality. In a disastrous decision, Nicholas II left the capital to personally command the army, leaving the government in the hands of his wife, Alexandra. She relied heavily on the advice of a mysterious figure, Grigory Rasputin, a self-proclaimed holy man whose influence over the royal family shocked and enraged the public. Rumors spread, trust vanished, respect evaporated. By 1917, Russia was no longer holding together. It was unraveling. In February, unrest finally erupted. Women textile workers in Petrograd walked out of factories demanding bread. Their protests spread rapidly. Workers joined. Students joined. Soon entire districts were on strike. Crowds filled the streets chanting not just for food but for change. The government ordered soldiers to suppress the demonstrations. But something historic happened. Many soldiers refused. Some lowered their rifles. Others turned their weapons against officers who commanded them to fire. The army, the very force meant to protect the Tsar, began to collapse. Within days, control was lost. The Duma, Russia's parliament, took action. Facing total breakdown, Nicholas II abdicated the throne. After more than 3 centuries, the Romanov dynasty ended not with triumph, but with exhaustion and surrender. Russia became a nation without a king. A provisional government was formed, promising democracy, reforms, and freedom. Political prisoners were released. Censorship ended. For a brief moment, hope returned, but the new leaders faced impossible challenges and made fatal mistakes. They chose to continue the war. The people had overthrown a Tsar to escape suffering, yet the war dragged on. Hunger worsened, discipline collapsed, authority weakened, power slipped through the government's hands. At the same time, workers' councils known as Soviets formed across the country. These councils represented soldiers and laborers and increasingly challenged the authority of the provisional government. Russia now had two centers of power, locked in a dangerous struggle. In exile, one man watched carefully. Vladimir Lenin believed that Russia stood on the brink of a socialist revolution. He argued that the chaos of war and hunger had created the perfect conditions. With help from Germany, which hoped to destabilize Russia further, Lenin returned in a sealed train. When he arrived, he delivered a message that electrified the masses: peace, land, and bread. No complex speeches, no empty promises, just simple demands that spoke directly to suffering. The Bolsheviks grew rapidly. They infiltrated factories, military units, and Soviets. They promised to end the war immediately, to give land to peasants, to place power directly into the hands of workers. The provisional government underestimated them. If this story is pulling you in, take a moment to like this video, follow the page, and subscribe. It helps bring more deep, true historical stories like this to life. By October 1917, Russia stood on the edge once again. Under cover of darkness, Bolshevik forces moved swiftly through Petrograd. Bridges were seized, rail stations occupied, communication centers taken without resistance. The Winter Palace, defended by only a handful of loyal troops, was stormed. The government fell almost without a fight. Lenin announced the transfer of power. The Bolsheviks now ruled Russia. But revolution does not end suffering overnight. Almost immediately, the country descended into civil war. The Red Army, loyal to the Bolsheviks, fought the White Army, a fractured coalition of monarchists, nationalists, foreign forces, and former officers. The war was brutal and merciless. Entire regions were devastated. Villages were burned, civilians starved. To maintain control, the Bolsheviks turned to terror. The secret police hunted enemies everywhere. Arrests were swift, executions frequent. Fear became a tool of governance. Loyalty was demanded without question. Meanwhile, the former Tsar and his family were held in captivity, moved from place to place as the civil war closed in. The Bolsheviks feared that royalist forces might rescue them. In July 1918, a final decision was made. In the dead of night, Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, their children and loyal servants were led into a basement. Gunfire echoed. When it ended, the Romanov dynasty was no more. An empire died not with ceremony but in blood and silence. By 1921, the Red Army emerged victorious. The Soviet Union was born. Private property was abolished, religion suppressed, industry nationalized. A new ideology reshaped every part of life. Lenin did not live long enough to see the full consequences. After his death, a ruthless power struggle followed. From it emerged Joseph Stalin, a man who would transform the Soviet Union into one of the most powerful and terrifying states in history. The Russian Revolution changed the world forever. It inspired revolutions across continents. It frightened governments. It divided the globe into ideological camps. The Cold War, nuclear standoffs, and decades of tension all trace their roots back to 1917. It proved that when suffering becomes unbearable, people will destroy even the mightiest empire. But it also proved that revolution can replace one form of oppression with another. The Russian Revolution was not just a change of power. It was a warning written in blood. A reminder that hunger, injustice, and silence can bring nations to their knees. History did not whisper this lesson, it screamed it. If you found this story powerful, like, subscribe, share, and comment your thoughts. Follow this page and visit the profile for more chilling, true stories from history. Because history is not just about the past, it's about understanding the present.